Sepang International Circuit in Malaysia played host to the 6th round of the 2014 Ferrari Challenge Asia Pacific, as the series continued its travels around the region. It's the second stop in Sepang this year, but the signature F1 track is a popular one with the drivers. Just over 5.5 kilometres in length, with 15 turns and 2 long straights, joined by a hairpin at the end of the lap. With temperatures rising in Sepang, all the contenders were ready to race, and Felipe Pret and David Gipto Biantoro were looking to cement their leads in their respective categories. But with only the Finale Mondiale, the World Final in Abu Dhabi, remaining on the calendar, every driver on the grid was keen to finish the season on a high. Hong Kong's Felipe Pret had qualified in pole position with a truly stunning performance, setting a time that was nearly 2 seconds quicker than the field. Alongside him was Copa Shell Series leader David Gipto Biantoro, who had outpaced all but one of the supposedly more experienced drivers from the Pirelli division. Pret was immediately into his stride at the start, setting the fastest lap of the race as early as lap 2. In the pack, the racing stayed competitive throughout with some classic midfield battles. Occasionally though, things boiled over, with Paul van Lowenhout's onboard camera giving us a front row seat as Eric Chung and Shin Jin took each other out here around the turn and into the barriers. Gregory Teo started the race 1 place ahead of Ringo Chong's yellow number 11 car, and the 2 Singaporean rivals were neck and neck all race. But it was Pirelli driver Chong who eventually got the better of Teo, with the 2 drivers finishing 3rd and 4th in their respective categories. Meanwhile, Japanese driver Tadagazu Kojima in the white number 125 car arguably had the most eventful race, starting from 16th position and climbing all the way up to 8th in the race, which included some back and forth antics with Australian driver Paul van Lowenhout. Song Bo enjoyed a steady race, with the Chinese driver in the number 148 car starting and finishing in 15th. Number 117 was Chinese driver Wei Zhu, who climbed from 14th position on the grid to creep into the top 10 by the time the checkered flag was waved. We're on board with Filipino driver Vincent Florendo now, who tried all race to get ahead of Lebanon's Tani Hanna, but fell just short, finishing 1 second behind him in 5th. Indonesia's David Gipto Biantoro once again dominated the Copa Shell division. Kojima and van Lowenhout continued their seesaw battle, but it was the Japanese driver who eventually won out here, and he would finish in 8th, with van Lowenhout a place further back. But the leading places remained fairly settled despite some very close racing. Pret came round untroubled to take the Pirelli classification in a dominant performance from start to finish, with Steve Wyatt moving up to 2nd place and Ringo Chong 3rd in the category. Gipto Biantoro again won the Copa Shell division, finishing 3rd overall, with Tani Hanna and Vincent Florendo right behind him to complete a podium of familiar faces. Impressively, all 3 drivers finished ahead of 3 other Pirelli competitors, showing that the difference between the 2 categories is getting smaller, while the racing itself gets more competitive than ever.
It's very difficult for me because it's not my kind of track. It's very nice, you have to be very precise and everything, and for me it's not exactly what I'm looking for. I'm always in Indy or some track like this. It's difficult for me today.
Yes, it was very tiring. It was a tough race. It was a tough race with conditions like this, but it was fun. It was a lot of fun.
As expected, the hot weather continued in Sepang as a large field of 458 Challenge cars lined up on the grid. Australian Steve Wyatt started from pole for the 2nd race of the weekend, ahead of Hong Kong's Felipe Pret. There was action at the exit of T2 when Wei Zhu was tapped from behind by Gregory Teo. However, the racing pack quickly settled into their rhythm and all recovered from the incident. Number 148, Song Bo, was later penalised for a jump start, with each of the 19 cars desperate to get away quickly, with a field spread 4 or 5 wide at points. Meanwhile, Teo was making up the time he'd lost at the start, already passing Shin Jin. But the top 3 on the grid, Wyatt, Pret and Angelo Negro, started to move clear, with Negro in 3rd keen to improve on his 11th place finish in race 1. Ringo Chong had started from 5th on the grid overall and was looking to snag another podium finish. There was plenty of movement in what was the 12th race of the season. Tadagazu Kojima started in 14th, but suffered some problems on lap 4 and ended up at the back of the field in 17th. Meanwhile, Eric Chung was also struggling, starting in 10th, but he would finish down in 15th, with both he and Kojima drawing 30-second penalties from the race officials. Vincent Florendo started in 7th, 2 behind Chong in 5th, but soon caught him up, and the two had swapped their starting positions by the end of the race. Chinese driver Yan Binjing in the 168 car had a solid race in the middle of the pack, but around him it was all action. Japanese driver Kensito started in 13th, and despite being passed here, ended up in 10th position, one ahead of Jing. Singaporean Tio, competing in their Copa Shell category, started in 12th, but had moved up 3 places by the end, while Wei Zhu went the other way, slipping back from 6th to 8th. But it was still a solid day's work for the Chinese driver, who finished 4th in his class. Wei Zhu had perhaps the most colourful car on the grid and was certainly showing lots of spirit on the track, clocking an impressive 2 minutes 16.330 in his 6th lap of the race for his best of the day. But the best time by any driver was set by pole sitter Wyatt, who led from start and never looked back in a dominant performance. The latter stages were just as exciting as the opening period, with Gregory Tio and Kensito continuing their tight battle. A little further ahead was Aussie Paul van Lowenhout, who finished in 6th after overhauling Ringo Chong. Wyatt's lead was close to 8 seconds by the end of the race, romping home to take the Pirelli division with ease, while Felipe Pret was denied a double victory, having to settle for 2nd. He used every inch of his experience to hold off Negro, who was pushing all the way to the line, and finished less than 0.3 of a second behind him in the final reckoning. Indonesia's David Jipto Biantoro took victory in the Copa Shell classification for the 2nd time this weekend, ahead of Vincent Florendo and Paul van Lowenhout.
The Pirelli tyres were pretty good. The day is very hot. I think the temperature is over 50 or 60 on the track, and so every lap just a little bit slower, but at the end not too bad. I was quite happy. Had to manage the back tyres, but it was good.
I think it was killing everybody. The heat was enormous heat. The tires were gone in a few laps. I think everybody was struggling with the grip, but at the end it was all very good race.
It was really tough. The temperature in Sepang is always, incredibly hot. I wasn't no racing for the past 3 rounds, so after 6 months no race, it was really, really tough.